Welcome to Echoes of the Unknown, the podcast where we explore some of the world's most fascinating unsolved mysteries. I'm Jack Montgomery, and today we're traveling back to 1964 when a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio was shattered by a brutal crime. 16-year-old Beverly Jarosz was alone in her bedroom just after Christmas listening to music. By nightfall, she would be dead, the victim of a savage attack inside her own home. There were suspects, rumors, and confessions that went nowhere, but still no clear answers over half a century later. On December 28, 1964, the quiet suburb of Garfield Heights, Ohio, was shaken by a crime so brutal that decades later, it still lingers in the community's memory. The victim was 16-year-old Beverly Jarosz, a high school junior with brown hair, blue eyes, and a life that followed the ordinary routines of a teenage girl in the mid-1960s. She lived with her parents Thaddeus and Eleanor, and her younger sister Carol on Thornton Avenue in a modest home on a quiet street. It was the kind of neighborhood where families knew each other and serious crime was rare. Beverly was described as polite, responsible, and focused on her studies. She was close to her family and had a small circle of friends. Like many teenagers of the time, her world revolved around school, church, and social outings with people she trusted. Nothing about her life suggested the kind of violence that would soon shatter it. That winter day, 3 days after Christmas, was cold and uneventful. The holiday season was winding down, and people were returning to their routines. That afternoon, Beverly was at home alone. Her father had gone out to run errands, leaving his daughter behind in the house. At some point during that stretch of time, someone entered the Jarosz home. When her father returned later that day, something immediately felt wrong. The house was quiet, except for the sound of music playing loudly from upstairs. At approximately 5:40 p.m., he made his way to Beverly's bedroom to check on her. Inside, he found a horrifying scene that no parent should ever have to see. Beverly was lying face down on her bed. She had been bound, strangled, and stabbed repeatedly. The attack was savage, suggesting there had been a violent struggle in the bedroom. The horrific crime stunned the community. Garfield Heights was the kind of place where doors were often left unlocked and neighbors felt safe. A brutal homicide inside a family home was almost unthinkable. Police launched an extensive investigation. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, interviewed classmates, friends, and acquaintances, and tried to piece together Beverly's final hours. But from the very beginning, the case was difficult. There were no clear eyewitnesses. No one reported seeing a stranger enter or leave the house. There was no clear sign of forced entry, raising the troubling possibility that Beverly may have known her attacker. As investigators dug into her personal life, they began looking at people close to her, especially the young men she had dated. One of the first people they questioned was her current boyfriend, 19-year-old Roger McNamara. He had been dating Beverly for several months and was considered by many to be a respectable, religious, and studious young man. He had even been at the Jarosz home the night before the murder. Because of his close relationship with Beverly and his presence at the house shortly before her death, detectives questioned him closely and considered him an early person of interest. McNamara told investigators he had been homesick, working on his car at the time of the murder. His alibi was viewed as somewhat weak, and at least one detective reportedly had lingering doubts about parts of his story. He agreed to take a polygraph examination, which he eventually passed, and over time he was ruled out as a suspect. Another young man who drew attention was Daniel Schulte, an 18-year-old former boyfriend. He had known Beverly for years, dating back to when they were younger, but their relationship had reportedly ended because her parents did not approve. He was described by some acquaintances as more rebellious than her current boyfriend. Schulte attended Beverly's wake, which in itself was not unusual, but some of his behavior reportedly drew attention. Investigators looked into him, and while he remained on some informal suspect lists for years, there was never enough evidence to charge him. He was never definitively linked to the crime. Detectives also considered a neighbor, an 18-year-old young man who lived just a few houses away. He had known Beverly since childhood and had been in and out of the Jarosz home in the past. Like others, he was questioned, but investigators were unable to build a case against him. Rumors and speculation soon spread through the community. At one point, detectives even considered the possibility that the killer might have been a woman because of the extreme violence of the attack and the possibility of jealousy or personal anger. That theory led to cruel rumors directed at one of Beverly's closest friends, but police publicly stated that she was innocent and had been cleared. Another name entered the investigation when a teenage boy from the same high school died by suicide shortly after Beverly's murder. When police searched his room, they found a photograph of a girl labeled Bev. For a brief moment, some suspected he might have been involved. But when the photograph was shown to Beverly's family, they confirmed it was not her. Fingerprint comparisons also failed to link him to the crime, and he was ruled out. Over the following months, detectives chased down dozens of leads. They investigated a man who had allegedly been watching Beverly at the Cleveland Museum of Art. They looked into a middle-aged man who had recently injured his hand. They questioned an encyclopedia salesman, a transient teenager, and others who had been reported behaving suspiciously. Each lead was followed, but none resulted in an arrest. For years, detectives also considered the possibility that Beverly had a secret admirer or stalker. Some people close to her said she had been bothered by someone who seemed obsessed with her. But no one was ever definitively identified as that person, and this theory was never confirmed. One of the more troubling figures to emerge during the investigation was a man named William Richard. He came to the attention of police after being arrested in connection with the abduction of a young girl in an unrelated case. During questioning, Richard reportedly told a detective that he was responsible for Beverly's murder and claimed to have knowledge of the crime. Some accounts say he even directed investigators to a knife in a bus station locker. However, that detail has never been publicly confirmed in official case summaries, and no forensic evidence was ever documented tying him to the murder. Before police could obtain a formal statement or build a case that could proceed to trial, Richard died by suicide, with no charges filed and no definitive evidence linking him to the crime. His alleged confession remains unverified, and police have never officially named him as Beverly's killer. Despite all these leads, the investigation into Beverly's murder gradually stalled. There were suspects, persons of interest, and rumors, but no definitive evidence tying any one person to the crime. Over the decades, investigators revisited the files. New detectives studied the old reports. Advances in forensic technology offered hope that evidence might finally reveal the killer's identity, but to date, there has been no breakthrough in the case. In recent years, investigators have said they are focusing on a new person of significant interest. This individual reportedly had known Beverly personally and had spent time in her home. He was someone she likely would have trusted enough to let inside. Detectives noted that he had a known interest in knives and rope, two items used in the attack, and that his alibi contained inconsistencies. Some of the people he claimed to be with on the day of the murder have reportedly refused to cooperate further with police. Authorities have not publicly named this individual, and no charges have yet been filed. To this day, investigators continue to pursue new leads and forensic testing in hopes of finally solving this case. Beverly Jarosz's house on Thornton Avenue still stands, a quiet structure on a suburban street. To passers-by, it looks like any other home. But inside, its history includes a moment of violence that shattered a family and left a community searching for answers. Somewhere, perhaps, there is still someone who knows exactly what happened inside that bedroom a few days after Christmas in 1964. Someone who has carried that secret through the decades. Someone who may still have the power to give Beverly's family the answers they have been waiting for all these years. Until that day comes, her murder remains what it has always been, a brutal, heartbreaking mystery, frozen in time and still echoing through the unknown. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Echoes of the Unknown. If you found this story compelling, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with fellow mystery lovers. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, even in the darkness of the oldest unsolved cases, truth often has a way of finding the light.